Thank you very much for inviting me to this very exciting presentation. I hope that it will be interesting for all of you. And if you have any clarifying questions when I give a talk, please make sure to ask these questions in chat. I will pause a few times during the presentation so that we can have some clarifications and discussions in the meantime. And I will start from actually introducing myself, because you don't know who I am. I am a doctor. I did my medical degree in Poland many years ago, and then worked for a couple of years as a clinical psychiatrist. I did residency in psychiatry, but rather early in my career, I decided to join the industry, and I spent many years, more than 25 years actually, working for some very big pharmaceutical companies like Eli Lilly, MSD, or Merck. This company has two names, by the way, Novartis, Sanofi, and Terumo. And in many functions as well. I know that these functions are not necessarily very familiar to you, but they are all kind of, circle around making sure that the innovative treatments that these companies develop are actually adopted in the market, because only when they are adopted, they can help patients. So that was my major focus during these years. And then since about 2 years, I am working as an independent expert and consultant, and I'm a mentor, advisor, and fractional executive in startup companies. I'm also an innovation management practitioner, and I specialize in artificial intelligence in medicine. So before I go any further, I have a question for you, and please don't be shy and answer the question. If you think about artificial intelligence in medicine, what is, in your opinion, like the biggest promise, the best thing that artificial intelligence can do in medicine to help patients? And what is the biggest risk that you can think about?
Well, I would say, sorry.
Go ahead.
I would say that possibly, I don't know if nowadays, but maybe in the future, the AI could diagnose the patient, like being there, maybe like if they would answer to its questions, some basic ones that diagnose. But there is a risk that I think that many disorders are connected, or disorders, illnesses are connected and interconnected, and then maybe the AI wouldn't be possible to connect them in the right way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a very good one, and I am talking a little bit about that in my talk as well.
I have like
anything else?
Something similar. I have something similar. So, it's like ChatGPT that makes information. Wait, can you give me a second?
Sure.
It's more like AI will analyze information about patient and give like fast analysis of the patient's medical condition. So it will be faster.
Perfect. Great. Anyone else?
Yeah, sorry. Well, I think this is a great opportunity in the future not to waste doctors' time and make a big impact in medicine. So even I have experience in this field. So recently, with my friends, I have created ML program for detection aplastic anemia areas in aplastic yields. So it was a very great program. Thank you.
Great. Perfect. So you see, you could have given this talk too, because you all know already a lot. And as I said, if you have questions during my presentation, please don't hesitate to ask. Now, when I think about AI in medicine, I have basically two major lenses. As you know, I'm not a data scientist. I am a clinician, or used to be a clinician, and then very involved in innovation in medicine. So I really have two perspectives. My first perspective is clinical. I always try to find out how will AI change patient outcomes, because that's what medicine is about. It's really helping patients. The second thing is how it will change the practice of medicine. Will it again save physicians some time, make things faster, better, more precise? And at the end, how it will improve clinical standards. So that's lens number one, and it's important because not always every AI solution that is offered in medicine actually improves patient outcomes. There are many that I would say some things are developed in a bit random manner, and not everything is equally useful. And then the second point, which is, I think, incredibly important, it's how it will be adopted and scaled up. Because medicine is rather complicated. Physicians already have their, working schedules. They have already systems that they use, certain softwares that they have on their computers. So any AI solution that is supposed to be used in medicine and in healthcare, it actually needs to fit into what they are already doing somehow. Because otherwise, the barrier to adoption, the change in human behavior would be just too big. And we see this very clearly that some solutions just don't match the current systems, and it takes them much longer to be developed and adopted. Now, also, when we think about AI, there is a very big spectrum of innovations that we can look at. And I'd like to introduce one concept that if you study innovation in any other area, you may come across this nomenclature. So it's not only related to AI, it's related to innovation management in general. There are, we call them horizons of innovation. There are typically 3 horizons of innovation. And horizon 1 is the current business or the current situation. And we always want to improve the current situation. It is innovation that supports the current goals of the business or the current goals of the healthcare company. And here we usually look at technologies. What is the technology that's already on the market that can improve the current situation? It's usually incremental innovation, which is small steps to improve the current situation. Then things that we will be talking specifically today about most of the time is called Horizon 2. And this is the next growth cycle. So what is the next big thing that will impact the market, that will impact the company, that will impact the business, will impact healthcare? And Horizon 2, sometimes people say it's the next 3 to 5 years, but it depends on the industry. In some industries, the cycle is so fast that it's just the next year. In some other industries, the cycle may be a little longer. Then Horizon 2 is also a little longer. But these are the innovations that will keep the business relevant and growing in the next business cycle. It's also very much related to new technologies, but it includes prototyping of these technologies, testing new solutions. And this innovation can be either incremental or radical. Radical innovation is the innovation that we sometimes call disruptive. But the terminology radical innovation is a little broader. Disruptive means that it disrupted a market. Radical means that it just transformed the market dramatically. And today we mostly focus on this one. And then there is Horizon 3, which is the uncertain future. And this is when we look at the market forces that shape the market today, and we try to develop scenarios, kind of, predict how these trends will transform our life, our world in the next years to come, but not next year specifically. It looks a little bit further into the future. And here, if we want to be truly, knowledgeable about these trends, we usually take a bit more exploratory approach. We see how things develop in the market. We collect data. We may put small bets on emerging trends and technologies. Usually, companies who do this well, they actually do a lot of very interesting radical innovations. But when you think about medicine and where we are in medicine, and again, I'm not talking about AI yet, just generally new technologies. When we think about medicine, what is Horizon 1? Horizon 1 may be a line extension for an existing drug. So, instead of a tablet, we develop a capsule, which is more easy to swallow. It could be some iterative improvements to a medical device that is becoming better. It could be changes to manufacturing process that lower cost of goods or improve the output, right? These are all Horizon 1 innovations, incremental improvements that help. And AI may play a role here as well. We have a patient intake form in a clinic, and that this form can be enabled by AI. And this is an incremental innovation then. And then in Horizon 2, the things that are currently coming to the market in medicine and will continue to grow in the next years is, for example, existing technologies developed for new indications. And when you have, for example, a technology like mRNA, which is the basis for two most famous COVID vaccines by Moderna and BioNTech, this technology is now used to develop vaccines against other diseases and also develop drugs against other diseases. So once the new technology is on the market, then you start developing this technology into other things. There is AI-enabled drug discovery that's growing, being adopted by more and more pharmaceutical companies, and also growing quite fast. Adopted by more and more companies. I think this has a potential to be really a breakthrough innovation. And finally, we've started printing human tissue through 3D printers. It's still in the testing and studies, but it seems like this is something that will revolutionize medicine in the next few years. Now, where the uncertainty lies in medicine, so Horizon 3, that we need to watch and observe and see how it will influence our medicine in general, is for example, quantum computing. You know, that quantum computing has not yet realized its potential. We don't know yet when it will. Obviously, people who are more knowledgeable about quantum computing than me, they will probably tell you with more precision when quantum computing will be ready for the market. But quantum computing will be another revolution in medicine, as it will be in other areas of human activities. There is nanomedicine that's also quite far away, and we don't know yet exactly how it will work, as well as, for example, creating artificial organs, because from 3D printing of human tissue to 3D printing of artificial organs, there is still a quite lengthy path. But that's, you see how this thinking along horizons kind of helps to understand what's current, what's coming, and what is uncertain. And there are already some either existing or emerging major applications of artificial intelligence in medicine. So now we are switching to artificial intelligence, and since now on, I will only talk about artificial intelligence. So we already have them on the market, and they are already helping to improve patient outcomes or clinical practice. Some of them are better developed. So from the left to right, you will see the ones that are better established to the ones that are just starting to be used. So a very well established is actually AI-enabled diagnostics. And this is mostly imaging. When I say imaging, I think X-rays, medical resonance imaging, computer tomography, so CT scans. Why? Because artificial intelligence is particularly good in reading images. And that's why in this area of medicine, AI actually picked up much faster than in other areas. Then the second one that is growing very, very fast already is AI-enabled drug discovery. Why it is important? Because drug discovery is a very lengthy process. And it starts with identifying molecules. They can be smaller or bigger, more or less complex, but identifying molecules that actually could potentially be drugs. And then these molecules have to be tested in clinical trials. And the clinical trial development takes approximately 10 years. So it's not a small endeavor. And also, many drugs that are tested in early clinical stages actually are not successful. They may not be successful because they are not effective. They may not be successful because they have too many side effects. So if we increase the number of molecules at the very early stages of drug discovery that could potentially be successful, then the productivity of the whole clinical trial development will be much better. So this process already started, and the top pharmaceutical companies already have AI programs in place to develop these early molecules that then have to go through normal clinical trials. The third very interesting aspect is streamlining operations, and I think one of you mentioned that AI can save time, it can automate routine tasks, it could automate scheduling. In countries that have private insurance, it can facilitate billing, claims management, and many other administrative tasks that currently require quite a lot of manual power. Another very interesting aspect that is coming, and I have an insight into some of those because I am the advisor in startups that are actually doing that. Patient health literacy, basically understanding medical conditions, understanding health, understanding treatments. You know that if we don't study medicine, the understanding of human body, how it works, and different diseases and treatments is sometimes very limited. And we rely a lot on physicians and nurses and other healthcare professionals telling us what to do. They don't always have a skill to educate patients properly. They should. But, interestingly, communication is not part of medical studies. So you may end up with doctors who are a little bit too hierarchical and just talk down to patients, give them a lot of advices that a patient doesn't necessarily understand, don't give the ability to ask questions and clarify some misunderstandings that patients may have. So and this does not seem to be changing because physicians have very little time to spend with a patient. In the United States, we say that the typical visit lasts 15 minutes. And it's not always the case. I had visits that lasted 45 minutes, but with a doctor. But in principle, the amount of time that a doctor has with a patient is shrinking. It's not growing. So there is an attempt that's already under development and already deployed by some healthcare systems of the AI-assisted language translation of some videos that have been created by the hospital as an educational tool for different diseases and treatments. And you can even plan sending these videos to patients in their mother tongue prior to the visit, after the visit, in response to certain questions. And that's kind of a very growing and increasingly sophisticated area of development. Now, the last two that are not yet well developed, but are very interesting from the medical perspective as well, and are sort of in progress to be developed, is the clinical decision support. And why it's interesting is, I think somebody of you also mentioned faster diagnosis and better information analytics. That the number of clinical publications, you may not know that the number of medical publications per year is about 1 million. It was a bit higher during the pandemic, a little lower right now, but we are still, way above 900,000 medical publications per year. So even people who are highly specializing in certain fields are unable to read all the relevant publications that are published in their fields. So AI not only can summarize this knowledge, but can compare the newly developed medical knowledge with the patient data from genomics, metabolomics, lifestyle, environmental factors, what have you, and then matching these two should provide physicians with some recommendations for maybe additional diagnostic tests, recommendations for specific treatments. And I think that's the area that's highly interested for many specialties to improve patients' outcomes by understanding, kind of at this crossroads of the most current medical knowledge, patient data, and treatment recommendations. And this all is leading really to personalized medicine. We have elements of personalized medicine already, but it's not yet fully personalized. So we hope that AI, by analyzing patient genetics, lifestyle, medical history, and also having all this knowledge that's being developed in a given field, will be able to personalize prevention and treatment plans. So that's something these are the main areas of AI in medicine. As I said before, on the left, you have the ones that are pretty well established, and toward the right are the ones that are still continues to be under development and maybe are in more nascent state. Now, I spoke about imaging being the main area of diagnostics where AI is already very well established. And just to illustrate this example, there are currently in the United States 692 FDA-approved applications to be used in medicine. And, not surprisingly, 77% in radiology. So you see that only 23% are currently in other areas. Now, it doesn't mean that everything AI-related in medicine has to be FDA approved. So there might be many applications on the market, especially the ones that help with administrative tasks that do not require FDA approval. And then the statistics about these ones are not so easy to find. So I didn't necessarily want to try to give you some wrong information. But FDA publishes reports. So in case of FDA, we really know how many they approved until now. And this data is from late last year. So it's pretty current. And then I also would like to tell you that from the business perspective, the market of AI in medicine is currently valued at about $20 billion. But because so many different applications are under development, the estimation is that within the next 10 years, this market will grow substantially. The compound average growth is assessed at about 30%. So one thing I'd like to tell you is that every prediction is always wrong. The question is just how much. But all the predictions, all the forecasts that I looked at really kind of in this area of magnitude. What makes me thinking that it seems that this market, even if it does not reach $281 billion in 2032, it probably will be way higher than it is now. And so all of you who want to be in medicine, all of you who want to be in data science or somehow related to this field, there is clearly a big market potential for professionals who want to improve medicine through artificial intelligence. And before I move any further, I want to go now a little bit more in depth into some of the aspects that I already mentioned. But before I go there, I'm curious if you have any questions so far. And if not, you can always write a question in the chat. Yes, I see. Yasin, I see you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do have a question. So we see like the substantial progress in AI that we're undergoing right now, even to the point where, machines would come to outperform humans in many tests. And that would be really beneficial in medicine. But what about, some of the risks that this would, give us? Is there, to what extent is there a lot of research on the, mitigating issues that AI could, open in medicine, for example, maybe for example, being used incorrectly or having errors or stuff like that?
Mm-hmm. This is a very good point, and I will touch upon it as well. But just to answer your question, one of the reasons why AI, so I showed you the AI and how it's already transforming medicine, but the adoption in medicine is still slower than in other areas. And there are multiple reasons for it. I have actually a slide on that as well. But one of the reasons is the risks. And because we have to be much more careful when we adopt AI in medicine. And we have to be careful about AI actually doing what it's intended to do. If we do not have the right training database, the AI may be poorly trained and may not actually give us the results that we want. So that's a very important consideration. That's why sometimes when you introduce AI solutions in medicine, sometimes the piloting phase is pretty long. And sometimes the human supervision is bigger than in other areas. So that's one. There's also data privacy. United States has laws called HIPAA. Many other countries have similar laws, which are above and beyond the regular privacy laws. It is really about the ability or not to identify an individual based on their health data. And so HIPAA has to be, in the US, all solutions have to be HIPAA compliant. What it means also in practice is that there's and it creates a difficulty in precision medicine, is that the data between different institutions are frequently not interchangeable, because I cannot send patient data, individual data, to another health institution unless a patient specifically requested that, because his data are private. Right? And even though in my institution I may have insights into this data because the patient was our patient, but I don't have insight into data that were generated in another hospital where the same patient was treated for another disease. Now, it is different in countries where a healthcare system is centralized. Like, for example, in Poland, where I come from, there is one electronic health record and every public physician has insight into these records. Right? But this question has to be asked and answered properly. How do we manage patient data? Right? And there is obviously cybersecurity risk, which is, what if this data leaks out? Right? What if the data are stolen? And it's obviously a lot of sensitive data are stored in the healthcare system. So I would say between AI being correct, protecting data privacy, and cybersecurity are probably three main risks that we are looking at in healthcare. Eliza, go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to ask you, because you said you're from Poland and that you studied medicine in Poland. May I ask you, where did you study?
I studied in Wrocław.
Oh, okay. And did you like it, actually? Because
it was a long time ago, so I don't know if I did like it. Yes, I think Wrocław used to be one of the top universities in medical universities in Poland, but I think we were third at the time when I studied, but I studied many years ago. So whatever I remember about it, it may not be relevant. However, I encourage you to link with me on LinkedIn. If you have more questions, I'll be very happy to talk.
Yeah, it's back on the third position, and I was thinking about Wrocław as well.
Yeah. Connect with me on LinkedIn and we can have, a separate discussion about that.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Mubarak, go ahead.
Hello, I have a question. So, do you think in radiology sphere, AI will completely take up the human phase, so everything will do AI?
I don't think so, honestly. I know that there is this danger when people believe that AI will take over physicians. I actually don't believe so. Why? Because AI. So there are some pluses of AI. AI is never tired. AI is trained on a very consistent data set. But also AI doesn't have a human intuition. Doctors work based on science and based on intuition that they acquire over the years of practice. AI will never have intuition. And if you think about AI being trained on certain sets of data, it may happen that what a patient has is so rare that an AI was never trained on that. And, AI cannot really give you what it was not trained on. So somehow I think that the physician's work, especially radiologists' work, may be even more interesting in the future, because very simple things will be solved by AI. But once the situation gets a little bit more complicated, when you really require human creativity, human intuition, then a physician will be still extremely needed. So I always say that AI will not replace a physician, but a physician who uses AI will replace the one who doesn't.
Okay, and I have another question.
Go ahead.
Do you think, so a lot of people are quite afraid of AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe many people are kind of controversial. And if they are laying in a hospital and they're saying, okay, now AI machine is going to fix you. So a lot of people tends to not agree and not to be very comfortable with it. And maybe they require a doctor that is more expensive, but they kind of trust them. So in this case, do you think it is irrelevant not to trust AI?
AI has to be supervised by a human being. I think the danger might be if we trust technology more than we trust humans, then would be a problem. But if a human supervises AI, I think it's really a very helpful situation. I would like to ask you to stop questioning. I see there are multiple questions. So let me go through the rest of my slides actually, because I think that your questions are getting outside of what I presented and getting into things that I want to present. So let's put the proper Q&A session at the end, and I will just tell you everything else that I want to tell you, and then we will talk again. All right? So I think that the biggest promise of AI is to make medicine more precisely adopted, more personalized for every human being. Because we are individuals. Medicine currently treats us a little bit like a crowd. You know, clinical trials are done in thousands of people, and then you know that a drug works in 60 to 70% of them. But a clinical trial very rarely tries to understand, or did in the past, understand in what groups of people this drug will work much better and in what groups of people it will not work so good. Because, you know, very frequently genomics, metabolomics, environmental factors, lifestyle was not part of the clinical trial. So the biggest promise, in my opinion, of AI is to make the healthcare much more personalized. And, you know, there are multiple definitions of what a precision medicine is and what precision versus personalized medicine is. I will not go into all of them today. That's a topic for another talk. But basically, it's healthcare that's tailored for you specifically as an individual. And currently, we do have some areas in medicine where healthcare is tailored for us. Blood transfusion, for example, is a very classical example of the oldest precision medicine that's out there. You cannot get blood that does not have your type, because you may die. So in blood transfusion, personalized blood transfusion was always the case. But we are getting into some cancer treatments already that are highly personalized. But I think the true promise of personalized medicine is still in our future. And how AI is already being used and grows into this precision medicine. So first and foremost, and some of you already mentioned that, there is a data analysis and interpretation, right? There's such a big amount of data that AI help with analysis and clustering of data is actually very helpful. There is the imaging analysis, which we already talked about, and that's the area that developed already very fast. There is predictive analytics, where the AI can help to analyze data about a patient, and by comparing a specific patient with the population of other patients, can basically predict how a disease will develop in a given patient. There was a clinical decision support that I've already mentioned, helping doctors to think about what potential diagnosis I should take into consideration, what potential tests I should do. There is a drug development, which I already mentioned, which could be very precisely developed for a very small group of patients, or maybe in the future even for an individual patient. There's also patient monitoring, you know, by using wearables. We can imagine much more precise and ongoing patient monitoring, because currently patient monitoring, unless a patient is in ICU or in a hospital, patient monitoring is not ongoing. Now, our smartwatch provides some ongoing monitoring, but for usually data that don't have medical value. And then there are personalized treatment plans and prediction of outcomes. So let's talk a little bit about some specific aspects of it. Where I think that the impact will be the biggest. So there is AI will definitely help in big data analysis, and you can imagine that in medicine there's enormous amount of data that we potentially could collect. We currently don't, but we potentially could. And then if we do collect all this data, like for example, if we collect data from all smartwatches that we are wearing, the amount of data will be way too big to analyze for a human being. So obviously AI can step in and help us with that. So there are very interesting developments in genomic analysis where we can see not only understand the patient's genome, which is already a current standard, but also see how gene expression changes in response to treatment. And this can help us to predict treatment outcomes. So maybe in the future, we'll be able to see much faster if the treatment is helping a patient or not, if we can actually monitor gene expression. Then there is, of course, the analysis, just pure analysis and clustering of medical data, which can help us to find hidden patterns. Just to give you an example, we divide some diseases into types. Diabetes is divided into type 1 and type 2. Cancer, breast cancer is divided into hormone sensitive, hormone insensitive. But in principle, if we allow AI to cluster existing medical science, it's possible that we will find not 2, but 15 types of diabetes, not 3 or 4, but 10 types of breast cancer with very specific characteristic. And this will then again lead eventually to better treatments and better predictive analytics and treatments. Then there is what we call a computer vision, which is seeing and quantifying very subtle abnormalities. You know that one area where AI is already better than humans in radiology, in imaging, is actually to see very subtle data, very subtle abnormalities, which a human eye cannot see, especially if a human eye is tired, because we also have to remember that there are studies showing that doctors at the beginning of the shift make less mistakes than doctors at the end of the shift because of the human tiredness. And AI never gets tired. So AI sees these small abnormalities throughout the day, same in the morning, same in the evening, which is not the case of a human being. Then we see very interesting developments in population and public health, where we, for example, can monitor epidemiology and real-world drug use based on big data. I am aware of, for example, a tool that monitors social media for specific drug side effects because people talk about it. So let's say a new drug is introduced to the market and you can listen on social media to people who actually talk about this drug. And you can then compare what do they complain about on social media versus what side effects this drug had in clinical trials. It tells you what's the real life situation. Do we see actually that the profile is similar, or do we see that some side effects may be more frequent? It also helps to discover very rare side effects. And then finally, we have all this analysis of big data for biometric sensors that I already mentioned, right? All the wearables. And this helps in either patient monitoring in a case if a patient has a disease, or also helps to run clinical trials where patients don't have to go to the clinic so often. They can be monitored remotely through these biosensors. So that's the big data analysis. Now, the second area that is very promising is AI drug discovery, and it's moving forward very fast. It actually started really in 2020, so just a few years ago, when we had the first AI-designed drug molecule that entered human clinical trials. And when this molecule actually failed in clinical trials, so AI was not necessarily better than a human scientist in discovering kind of a better, more successful drug, but it doesn't mean that it's something wrong. I mean, most drugs, sometimes people don't know it, most drugs going through clinical trials actually fail. So it's not a surprise. But then we have a search in algorithms that help to develop molecules. We have systems that can predict structures of most of the proteins in human body. We already have AI developed molecules moving through phase 1 clinical trials, which is the first study in humans. And then we already have a possibility to, since 2023, to create and validate antibodies in silico meaning in computer. So using generative AI. And then FDA granted what is called the orphan drug designation. It's a drug for rare disease that's going through a different clinical development pathway for a drug that was designed by AI. So you see the field is moving very fast. Now, in drug development, there are many areas where AI can actually help. First, you know that when a drug, how the drug actually works in the body. A drug works usually by connecting with what we call a receptor. A receptor is a molecule, it's usually a protein that is attached to the cell membrane. And this protein usually has a function. It may prevent certain substances to enter the cell. It may facilitate certain substances to enter the cell. So how drugs work, they attach to these proteins that sit on cell membranes, and they act as blockers or activators. So as a result, the substance that this protein is responsible for may be blocked from entering the cell or may be entering the cell faster. And that's the typical mechanism for drugs to work. So in order to develop a drug, we need first to have a target. And that's what we call target identification. AI can actually help in identifying these proteins in human body that sit on cell membranes that could become targets for drugs. And that's as important as actually developing a drug. Because if we have several diseases for which we cannot develop drugs because we have not identified the right targets in human body. And I think that's the first very important step. Then the second step is AI can, by knowing what the target protein is, it can simulate several molecule structures that could attach to this protein. So it basically simulates the development of different potential we call them drug candidates. And then, if we already have a multiple of these molecules developed, AI can help to predict the drug properties. So it may look at the molecule and say, hey, I think this molecule will have this efficacy, may have this side effects, or it may be toxic for, I don't know, fetus, so pregnant women should not take it. Now, it all has to be tested in clinical trials, or first animal trials, but prediction of drug properties is already possible with AI. And then they can, knowing all that, they can actually design a molecule de novo, meaning they actually design the entire molecule of the drug, doing the simulation, knowing the targets, predicting properties. Finally, assume that an AI develop potential 100 new molecules for a given disease. It helps to prioritize them because all of them have to go through clinical trials eventually, and clinical trials are very expensive. So we would like AI to help us to assess the probability of success. And that's why prioritize these molecules and say, hey, we want molecules that are the most effective, but the least toxic, right? We don't want a lot of side effects. And we want the ones that can be given orally, not necessarily through IV. And then AI can prioritize molecules for clinical development. And last but not least, we need to create these molecules in real life. We need to understand how to manufacture them. So AI can actually help to identify the synthesis pathway, how to synthesize the molecule, can give us some ideas about the right manufacturing process. So you see that there are lots of ways how even when we take one area, which is AI drug development, how actually AI can help in all these different steps. Now, all of this eventually must lead to improving patient outcomes. Right? So what we already see and where the field is going in improving patient outcomes. There's a very, very interesting development in cancer screening and diagnosis. For example, we've already seen that there is a much better cancer detection through imaging technologies. So all the CT scans, MRIs, X-rays. So lung cancer, for example. That's one area where we see that AI is already a few percentage points better than an expert radiologist. The one study that I've seen recently actually showed that AI is 6% better than an expert radiologist. And this is related mostly to being able to detect very small abnormalities. And then there is another area which is called biomarker testing. Biomarkers might be images, but biomarkers are also things that we find in proteins and other substances that we find in patients' blood. And there are more and more so-called biomarkers, so these substances that are related to different diseases, including oncology. We can monitor if a tumor, is shrinking or growing by monitoring certain proteins and substances in blood. But again, there are so many of them, and they may be in different configurations. So again, it's the analysis of big data, again, helping us to monitor diseases. And then what it may eventually lead to is that tumors will be classified based on the gene expression instead of location. You know that now we talk always about lung tumor and pancreas tumor and brain cancer and stomach cancer, etc., and breast cancer. But it may happen that a specific breast cancer is very similar to the pancreatic cancer or brain cancer based on the gene expression. And maybe in the future, we will not classify cancers. Obviously, it's always important to see in what organ a cancer is growing. But from the treatment perspective, it might be more important to understand the gene expression, because it will lead to the same treatment of a cancer that's located in the breast and a cancer that's located, I don't know, in a pancreas. If the gene expression is the same or very similar, we may assume that similar drugs will work. But it may, if we go this route, it will revolutionize how we do clinical trials. Because currently, clinical trials are done for specific cancer in specific organ. So it would simplify clinical trials if we can say, we found that this drug works for cancer with this gene expression, so we can use it irrespective of the location if the gene expression is similar. So that's one area. Then in treatment planning and response prediction, AI models already in some diseases can predict responses and guide the selection of optimal therapies. That actually include the demographics, clinical history, and genetic profiles. Especially genetic profiles are becoming important in guiding some treatment decisions, and this is specifically or more frequently in oncology. And finally, AI can evaluate multi-factor data from several patient assessments and really provide more precise information for prognosis and disease progression prediction. And this is important because sometimes if we think the disease will not progress fast or will not become very severe, the treatment that we offer is less aggressive. And again, especially important in oncology, where we really want to kill the tumor, this treatment may be more aggressive if the prediction is that the patient will actually not do that well. So maybe I will also stop here and ask if you have any clarifying questions for the part that I presented, because I want to go now into the issues and challenges. But before I go there, any questions about what I've just presented?
No.
Okay.
No, it's clear.
It's clear. Perfect. So what gets in the way? So this is so why things are not moving as fast as they could? Because technologically, many of these things could have moved much faster. And again, I touched upon a few of them. I already spoke about data security, which is about, in the US, it's called HIPAA, which is the law regulating patient sensitive data. And every solution has to be HIPAA compliant, meaning you cannot get patient individualized data from the system unless you are a healthcare professional who takes care of the patient, works in a given clinic, works in a given hospital. So that's one. But then there are many other, challenges in medicine to adopt AI. So one of them is what we call companion diagnostics. For example, we say, well, AI can analyze genomic data, but the genomic data have to be generated. So what is the tool that we use to generate genomic data? It must be something that extracts patient DNA and then analyzes DNA and gives the output. And then the output of the diagnostic test is then put into AI, and AI can do the job. But all these, so this tool that is used in addition to another tool, we call it in medicine companion diagnostic. And they have to be developed. They have to be approved by regulatory authorities, so FDA in the United States and, EMA in European Union, and then another regulatory authorities in other countries. And then, if they are supposed to be adopted in medicine, they should be probably reimbursed by payers, by ministries of health or any other insurance companies that reimburse, because otherwise, who will pay for them? So there is the whole development process and regulatory approval and reimbursement process for companion diagnostics. And then some of that is actually very complex and expensive still. Cost of testing and the interpretation maybe still, the costs are going down, but the costs are still there. So the cost of the complex genetic and other information is still there. Now, there is some issues with AI adoption in clinical practice. Because, physicians and medicine in general is rather risk averse. And the reason being is that we don't want to create unnecessary risk for the patients. Because we are here not only to improve we are here basically to improve patient lives, not to make them worse, but also not to create any dangers for patients. So by definition, medicine is risk averse. And also, because AI is a little bit unclear for the medical professionals about how AI works, they usually do not necessarily understand these algorithms. They ask always about how generalizable it is. Can I reproduce these results? Are there any algorithm biases? These are very, very, very important aspects of AI adoption when we need to understand, is this specific solution only applicable to my population because it was tested on my data, or another hospital can adopt it, and will AI work equally well for their population? And sometimes it's not the case, because it depends on the data set on which AI was tested or trained. And that's why they cannot be generalizable or reproducible. And finally, we sometimes introduce biases into the training data set. And if we introduce a bias into the data training set, then the outcome will be biased too. And there has to be a specific attention paid to data sets and existing bias in data sets. For countries that are multiracial, like United States, and the racial groups on average may differ with the socioeconomic factors, it may translate, for example, into the level of insurance, that some groups have better insurances on average, and some groups may have worse insurances on average. So the utilization of health resources in given disease may not only depend on the severity of the disease, but also on the availability of the insurance. And if this is not taken into consideration, out of a sudden, AI, and this happened once in the United States, AI for the same severity of symptoms was offering African American patients lesser treatment than Caucasian patients, because Caucasian patients on average had better insurance and used more health resources, and African American patients on average had worse insurance and used less healthcare resources. Because this data was put into the training data set, AI didn't know why, but AI noticed that African Americans use less healthcare resources in the same disease with the same severity, and this was the output. Now, good thing is that somebody noticed and quickly corrected that, but we need to be very cognizant of these biases that happen in societies that have big discrepancies between racial groups or ethnic groups, or urban and rural groups. It can be any discrepancy between different groups. Now, another interesting challenge is the fact that people in healthcare system actually rarely collaborate together. They have very specific tasks and very specific jobs, and they have the day full doing the job. So when you look at any AI solution, really requires very cross-functional development. But data scientists, clinicians, biologists, they don't necessarily work together. And even in a global, in a society as such, you may have regulators at FDA coming with one solution, but then payers in Medicare, Medicaid coming with another solution. And that create some discrepancies in the system, lack of collaboration in developing these solutions and lack of collaboration in adopting them. So, for example, there is a category called digital therapeutics, and these are digital solutions that have to be approved by the FDA because they are supposed to treat certain diseases. And FDA went very far to create a pathway for these digital therapeutics to be approved. But our insurance in the United States is lagging behind. Our public insurance, which is Medicare, Medicaid, does not have any path forward to reimburse digital therapeutics. So they are kind of in limbo because they cannot expect patients to pay the full development cost of a digital therapeutic, which has to go through clinical trials like a drug or like a medical device. So you see that even in one country, two major institutions that are in charge of people's health did not agree to how they treat a specific group of products that are coming through. And then there is one more, which I think is very important for you, because there is currently insufficient knowledge among people about AI in medicine. There are not enough data scientists. There are not enough physicians who understand that, not enough other healthcare professionals who understand that. All hospital CEOs complain that there's not enough people to hire. Even if they wanted to hire, there's just not enough talent on the market, which I think creates a great opportunity for you, because if this is an interesting field for you, I'm pretty sure that everybody will be hired. And there will be no, for years to come, there will be no unemployment problem with these new solutions in medicine. So basically, when we think about, so what about that? All these things. So imagine you work for, a few years down the road when you all, graduate from and become part of the professional workforce. So what to do to actually improve this adoption of AI in medicine? And there is actually a process for that. I think the process includes 6 steps. And whatever innovation you take, it always includes 6 steps. The first step is to have the strategy. The organization has to have a strategy. They need to know why they need AI and for what specific purpose. What is the problem? So the first thing is the problem statement. It's like some sort of strategic imperative. Why do we need AI and what specifically we need it? Because otherwise, you do what we call in consulting, we call it boiling the ocean. You basically try to boil a cup of tea by boiling all the water in the ocean and never really reach the right temperature to prepare a cup of tea. So you need to have a very precise and specific goal in why we want to do it. Then the second point is the discovery. We need to find out, before we even go into developing our own solution, is there anything out there that we can build from or we can actually adopt, which is always easier and faster than developing things from scratch? And then the discovery also includes other aspects like, how this will be used, what is the current, workflow, what the currently healthcare professionals need and want, would they adopt it or not? Then there is the part which is very exciting, is the ideation part. We usually call it hackathons, when you actually develop ideas. So how do we move forward? And then you develop an idea. You basically develop an idea or a cluster of ideas that in the best way matches the strategy. Then you have to develop it and finally implement, which is the whole adoption and commercialization process. But if you remember that every innovation takes 6 steps, then it's easier to identify and kind of organize work along these 6 steps. And I'd like to finish with what I believe, maybe 10 years from now, classical patient journey will look like. And I'd like to tell you that all the things that I'm talking about on this slide are actually possible already, considering technologies that we currently have. But it does not mean that the current patient journey looks this way, because they have not been yet fully adopted. So, in countries that have private or public insurances that you have to buy, AI may help to choose the insurance that the best matches the risk factors of a patient. For example, in the United States, where we all have to pick private insurance, if I have risk factors for diabetes, I may ask AI, and we have thousands of insurance plans to pick from. We actually have people whose only job is to help patients to pick the right insurance. So it's very highly manual endeavor. I can have AI helping me to pick insurance that pays, reimburses insulin and other diabetic drugs better than other insurances. If I have risk factors for diabetes, I may say, well, seems like I may need this insurance in the future. Let me pick this one. So that's one. Then when you schedule appointments, you may have AI-enabled intake form and AI-generated welcome videos in patient's mother tongue, because the translation is already pretty good and available. And then during the doctor's appointment, especially if you're a new patient and you already have some record, an electronic health record, AI may help develop a summary of your condition so that a physician doesn't have, and physicians usually don't go back, pages and pages and pages of your medical history. So AI can actually quickly summarize your history that appears on the top of the record. And finally, can recommend diagnostic tests, the ambience voice technology can help to write notes. So a physician can talk with you, and the notes are being written by what is called the ambience technology in the record. Then you can have diagnostic tests that are AI enabled, and all these, analysis of genomics, metabolomics, etc. A diagnosis can be AI enabled by AI, based on your gene expression, predictive severity, outcomes based on some comprehensive testing. And finally, there could be proposed personalized treatment plans. Then the treatment itself may be based on AI-developed drugs and also highly personalized for your specific case. And then there's another issue, which is medical adherence. We call it medical adherence is how well a patient follows the recommendations. And in chronic diseases, within the first 6 months, about 50% of patients stop taking drugs or stop taking them as recommended for a variety of reasons: misunderstanding, side effects, costs, lack of access, multiple reasons. But some of this is boredom, some of this is forgetfulness, and there are already developed applications that are based on behavioral sciences and AI actually help patients to kind of keep going and keep implementing all the recommendations that are necessary. And it could also include dietary, exercise, lifestyle changes, not only drugs and medical devices. Finally, if a patient ends up in a hospital, you may have AI-enabled robotic surgery. That's also part of some surgical wards already. At home, they may be monitored through wearables and telehealth visits so that they don't have to always show up in the clinic or in a hospital. Maybe they are eligible for a clinical trial and AI can help to match them with the right trial, or also they can participate in a decentralized trial where they don't have to come to the clinic all the time because, again, wearables will monitor the condition. And finally, there can be a continuous follow-up of their drugs that they take and side effects through some databases that match patient symptoms to known and less known side effects or drug interactions, so that the drugs can be adjusted based on that. And how much time we still have? Quite a lot of time for the Q&A session. So what I want to say is my final thoughts, what I really believe about AI in medicine. I think that it has tremendous potential. It will transform the standards of care sooner or later. I do believe that we need really responsible development and governance, because if we don't, the risks are actually quite high in medicine, and that's something that we always need to remember. But it can help to improve clinical decision-making, enable early disease detection, make healthcare much more precise and personalized for all. It also can democratize medicine. You can imagine all the data that are generated by scientists in maybe a handful of countries that can be made available, and databases can be made available to physicians and nurses in countries that may not have such a good healthcare infrastructure. And then the systematic approach is necessary. So when I talked about horizons, when I talked about 6 steps, we cannot make AI adoption or development in medicine chaos. It has to be well-planned, systematic approach, taking into consideration all these pluses and minuses that we can see. And finally, what I said already, I do not believe that AI will replace doctors or pharmaceutical industry, but doctors and pharmaceutical companies who use AI will definitely become better. I think calling it artificial intelligence is a little bit of a really misnomer, because there's nothing artificial in artificial intelligence. It's all developed by humans, and it does not create an alternative path. It augments humans to do better. And I think especially in medicine, we will see that. So you may request the slides and you will receive them. I listed here all the sources that I use, so that if you are interested in some specific aspects, you can always go to the source. And as always, I'd like to thank you for listening to me. We will be very happy to answer your questions. But I also would like to tell you that I used AI to develop this presentation. I used 3 AI-based solutions. One was Beautiful AI for the slide design. I used Perplexity AI, which is GPT-4 for collecting information and sources. And I also used MergeFlow, which is another type of clustering AI, to help me come up with. So between Perplexity and MergeFlow, I really analyze the data that are published, the sources that I included in the presentation. And I'd like to open the Q&A session now. So please ask questions.
Hi, can I ask a question? Or
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you for this amazing lesson. It was really insightful. I really want to ask if you have more information about how genetics or family history line lineages are used by AI to make the medical process easier or more personalized.
So I think that, yes, I think genetics is improving. I don't know if I can give you more information, but genetics definitely is improving. First and foremost, we can now analyze a person's genome, and what we see in the genome, we see risk factors for certain diseases. Now, a risk factor does not mean that you will get it. Okay, there are very few diseases that are so much related to genetics that we can say with 100% certainty that a disease will happen. So some doctors actually say that we are scaring patients unnecessarily. But on the other hand, if you have a risk for a certain disease discovered in the genome, you can sometimes do something about it. So, for example, if people know that they are prone to diabetes, they may really try to stay very lean and try not to be overweight and try to exercise. And if they do more of that, they actually lower the risk of getting diabetes, even though it's in their genes. The risk is in their genes. So there are companies so one thing that's done is there are companies who do it for commercial reasons. So companies like 23andMe, they do it for commercial reasons, and they are not regulated by FDA. So in some ways, they give you information about your risk factors, but they are not giving you any medical advices. You would have to take this again. It shows you how medicine is still fragmented. Because in one place you do a genome test for commercial reasons, it may not be perfect, but then these people don't advise you anything. You need to take it to your doctor and talk about your risks, right? But there is an increasing trend, an increasing discussion in the medical media that every person when they are born, we should do a full genetic test on them. Because this way we identify certain diseases, we identify risk factors. If this will come through, I don't know, but I hope that it will, because the cost of such tests are lower nowadays, and it makes perfect sense just to, identify everything that may happen to the child when the child is born. I don't know if I answered your question, though.
That was amazing. Thank you. That was a great answer.
Okay, I think, Bekrus, you wanted to ask question before and I didn't let you, so go ahead.
So thank you for the lesson, first of all. That was really great and has a lot of information. I wanted to ask a question about about the implementation of AI on a local scale. With my team, I had a group of like 6 people building AI-based project for the diagnosis of different type of like illnesses at the local hospital.
You know, you are breaking up. I don't necessarily. I didn't
Work
hear
with
what
some
you.
professors at the hospital, and then they
Okay.
allow, and then the team build the AI.
Mm-hmm.
Am I lagging now? What about now?
Mm-hmm. I hear you better now.
So
Yes.
So yeah, what I was saying is that we work with the professors and gather some of the data about the illnesses of the people, and then we built an AI-based website. What we basically did was that, for example, if you put some of the symptoms and the diagnosis of the patient, it gives some of the recommendations, and then the possible illness that the patient has, so that the doctors do not really spend a lot of time on like figuring out what the illness is. So here's the problem. But for example, when we wanted to implement a project to the local hospital, they were hesitant about the collection of data that AI can collect. That's what the data, and then like help doctors implement the idea, because they are rejecting the idea now.
Oh, and what is the reason why they reject?
They are afraid of AI collecting their patient data and then like exposing them.
So in this particular situation, I would recommend that, because you did it with some professors from this hospital, right? So the hospital was
Yeah.
involved, and this was developed for them with people who were, it's not coming from the outside, it was developed for them by people in this particular hospital. I would, in this case, probably focus on really looking at the cybersecurity and educating them why it is not more risky than any other, because they probably use other digital software, right? So this is basically, you can try to show them how it is not more risky than the software that they currently use anyway, and how it will be helpful. And sometimes, so it's always combination of the efficacy and risk, right? How effective it will be for me, how useful it will be for me, and how risky it is for me. So when you say the risk is basically the same as any other software you use, if this is true, but that has to be true, the second thing you can do then say, hey, and this is how it will help you. So for example, it's not always good to start with diseases that everybody knows very well. Because if I am an internal medicine doctor, I may not need a lot of help in diagnosing some heart conditions or lung conditions or stomach ulcers and things like that. But maybe the entry point is with diseases that are more difficult to diagnose, like rare diseases. You know that doctors, during their studies, they learn about a few hundred diseases. Some people say 700. I'm not sure. And there are 7,000 diseases in the world. So we never learn during our studies about most of the diseases that exist, because they are rare diseases. So if you take this approach and say, we will help you, like, for example, show an example of a patient, say, hey, we had this patient with a rare disease and it took them 5 years to diagnose this disease because nobody knew that. If you come from the angle of where they see the needs, and if you show them it's not as risky, again, if it's true, then the adoption should be much faster. And then they will get used to it and they will use it in other diseases. So you come with the biggest unmet need, and then they will start using it in more and more and more situations. Does it make sense?
Thank you. We'll definitely do it. And I also have like a small little question about your opinion on the use of AI in gene editing. You were talking about like collecting the DNA so that we can like potentially avoid some of the cancer that the person might have later their life when they are born. But what about like gene editing with the help of AI before the person is even born?
Before they are born, I don't know. I don't know enough about the technology that currently exists to possibly do it. But there are gene therapies on the market, very few, The most recent one was approved for oh my God, I'm missing the name of the disease. It escaped me. But it's done to children that are less than 2 years old. We have technology called CRISPR that is able to take out a piece of a gene and put in the healthy gene instead. So this technology exists, and there are a few, 2 or 3 currently, genetic therapies already approved. And it did start with a very thorough analysis of a genome. Hemophilia B is the one that the disease that I was missing. The most recent approved gene editing therapy is for hemophilia B, and it's given to children below 2 years of age. So this field is improving, and I think that it is potentially the next step to do it even prior to the child being born. But sometimes it's not necessary. Sometimes it may just increase the risk. If you can do it in a very small child, it could be equally beneficial. All right.
Thank you for that.
I see Michelle on top of my queue.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. It was wonderful. I was very engaged the whole time. I just had a question. We always talk about how a lot of people are very scared that AI will replace their jobs in different fields. And you mentioned that a lot of physicians and healthcare professionals probably will not have their jobs replaced. But you did mention in the middle of the presentation that there are some people whose job is entirely to help patients pick insurance based on their diseases and their risk factors. But if AI is able to do that, then wouldn't we be replacing those people's jobs either ways?
I would say yes, probably yes. So when I see where the medicine, how it will replace jobs in medicine, I think the more lower administrative jobs may be replaced. Some not necessarily lower jobs, but some jobs that require maybe health coaching. These are not low-level jobs, but health coaching. Maybe jobs related to. Maybe there will be less radiologists, not as many as now. But I think that when you think about it, so yes, some jobs will be replaced, but probably not doctors' jobs, probably not nurses, most likely not paramedics. But then you look at the administration, there might be some job replacement there. And maybe some health coaches with the increase of chatbots, very sophisticated chatbots, that may happen as well. Some health educators, it may happen as well. But what I'd like to tell you is that we've been going through this in history. I don't know. I am old enough that I remember times prior to computers. We had typing machines, and there was a job called a typist. These were mostly women who were sitting in offices, and the only job of this woman was to type documents. And the existence, the moment the Microsoft Word came to the market, these jobs were massively eliminated. But did we see a lot of jobless people on the market? No, because they retrained themselves and they started using they became more skilled administrative assistants, and they started using the Microsoft Word, right?
Yeah.
But the typist was needed because if I typed my own scientific paper, if I made one mistake on a page, I had to retype the entire page. You imagine how manual and time consuming it was. And if you make a mistake in a Word document, it's inconsequential. You just change it, right? So these waves of some jobs being eliminated and other jobs being created are with us, have been with us for generations, basically, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily be terribly concerned about it, but I would be more concerned about how do we retrain them to do other things, right?
Yeah, thank you. I also had one more question.
Sure.
I'm from the US, and they, in school and everything, and a lot of different medical volunteering, they really reiterate that whole HIPAA regulations. So it's something that I was thinking about. But when you were discussing feeding the AI processed patient DNA for or just to look at like how like the genome like and the genes of the patient would affect their risk factors and everything. With like these HIPAA regulations in place, are we actually allowed to feed the AI, you know, personal health information without changing the policy itself? Because wouldn't there have to be some like adjustments being made to HIPAA in order to do that?
I think that you're right that adjustments will have to be made to HIPAA, and I think for reasons that we don't always think about. So, for example, now when you think about data that can identify a patient, it's usually name, social security number, address, gender, maybe diagnosis, but there are a few. Now, with AI, there will be more things that will allow us to identify a patient. Just imagine if a patient did MRI in one hospital and then the same MRI in another hospital, especially if this is their head, for example, the skull may be so specific that AI can identify the same patient. Right? So we will have to change HIPAA, but because AI is so specific that it may be able in the future to identify a patient based on information that currently we cannot identify them based on, right? Now, when you think about genomic data, I also think it depends on the context a little bit, because if you currently do the genomic studies, this data already sit in patient electronic health record. Right? It's already in. So the question is, how do you feed AI? How do you create anonymization of this data? So, for example, there is a specific process which obviously we didn't have time to talk about today. It's called tokenization. So you give a token to a patient profile, and then why it's important? Because the genomic data have to go together with the disease, with lifestyle, with everything else that we know about the patient, but we don't know who the patient is. The data that will allow to identify them have been removed. But we need to have age, we need to have gender, but there is a token attached to the data, and the data always travel with the token, so we can link them back to an individual. But the AI does not get information about a patient, it just gets the data are identified by a token. So these are the ways how people try to go about feeding AI with the data, but not disclosing patient identification. There are currently, I think, 3 main companies in the US who do data tokenization. It's also used in clinical trials, where you also have to aggregate a lot of data without identifying an individual patient. But then at some level, you have to identify an individual patient because you have to monitor them.
Now, let's say that like this process, like it's intended to work, but in case the AI is able to identify like the patient and this information like goes out, what would be the consequences of that? Because that would be like a pretty big breach.
You know, it already happened in a few situations, not because of AI, just because, you know, we all rely on digital systems, and it's I would say to some degree it's unavoidable that it will be leaked out, and this already got out. There were a few insurances that patient data got out. So I think that it's the same as if the data from a bank were leaked out. The most dangerous is that criminals are taking possession of our social security numbers and email addresses and home addresses, etc. And then trying to, I don't know, open accounts on my behalf or your behalf in another bank. But for that, we already have a number of verification systems that are supposed to help with that. And I think with healthcare, it will be a little similar. These things will happen, and we will simply have to be better prepared as a society, as a business, to deal with potential consequences of that. Now, what is very dangerous in healthcare is if you're, let's say, but it would require companies to be really corrupt. If an employer gets a data of a disease that you have, and they say, oh, we cannot promote her because in 2 years she may develop dementia. Right? Because a person is, I don't know, 55 years old, she has a strong risk and family history of dementia, and now we want to promote her, and out of a sudden an employer says, oh, well, promote her, she will have Alzheimer's in 3 years. So that would be the most probably detrimental. But if employers and other people don't make decisions based on our health, because they don't have access to it, then it's probably, it's the same consequences as other breaches.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Now, I see that there are a lot of questions. I have to tell you that I will have to go in 3 minutes because I actually have another meeting that I shouldn't be late to. So I don't know, Sophia and other organizers. How do you want to? What do we do with other questions?
So I think possibly they could write it down and then I send it to you.
I could answer in writing if you send me questions in writing. I can answer them in writing.
Okay, that sounds great, and I can also share your LinkedIn with them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, definitely.
great.
So can we send our questions to your LinkedIn profile?
Yes, you can, and yes, definitely you can.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You can.
Do we need to write that our name and how do you know us from? Like we're FGS program students. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, mentioning that you're from FGS, or you can also message me and then I will send it. So
Yeah.
we'll find some way, definitely, and yeah.
And I'd like to tell you, I will not have answers to all questions, but these are very good questions because these are questions that we are all asking ourselves, and people who develop AI, they are asking exactly the same questions. How do we prevent these risks from happening? Right? That's on top of mind, basically. It's really on top of mind.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this lesson and the Q&A session. It was really amazing, and even I learned some new things, which was, I mean, of course I did, but yeah, it was really amazing. So yeah, I will send you the recording.
جلسات الشاحن بس خلي بالك الشبكة تفصل خلي بالك
I think it's So yeah, I will send you the recording, and I think I took some pictures. I will also send you that, and yes, thank you so much. Thank you. It was an honor.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me again. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. It has been a pleasure to meeting all of you and speaking with all of you. And as we said, I will gladly reply to your questions after the session. So connect with me on LinkedIn. You see my name here. I'm not difficult to find, and we can talk about it later.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, so we are gonna stay okay, we are gonna stay on this link, and we are gonna start the presentations in a few minutes. So please, everyone who is presenting, join this link.
Sophia, I had a question.
Yes.
One of our teammates will probably have issues with internet and I don't know, light or something. So what do we do?
Is she or he going to